evening. My name is Brynn, and I am Ernie's granddaughter, and this is Deja Vu. Feels like we were just doing this just a few months ago, because we were. When Grandma died, we knew it would only be a matter of time before Papa would go too. They really did everything together, so why not this too? Just a few months ago, my grandparents' house was still full of their things. It was full of china and antiques, collectibles from all over the world. And now most of the furniture has been sold. Heirlooms have been distributed. The guest book has been closed. But even while it's mostly empty, there is one distinction about my grandparents' house that is still palpably present when you walk inside: the ticking and the chiming of the clocks. Most of the clocks have also been cleared out too by this point, but there are still a few around the house, and when you walk in, there's still that familiar rhythmic ticking. Many of you know that my grandparents loved clocks. They collected them, and when you went into their home, you were surrounded by pendulum clocks, cuckoo clocks, grandfather clocks, or as I called them, Papa clocks. And when you were in their home, every hour on the hour, there was this kind of magical moment when all of them would come to life and harmonize, and a bunch of little songs would tell you what time it was. The ancient Greeks had some funny notions about time. Time for them had two faces: Chronos and Kairos. Chronos time was clock time. It was the time that kept ticking and chiming on the hour, time that crosses days off of our calendar. Chronos is the time of events and milestones and occasions. Papa, my Papa, witnessed many landmark events in the century that he lived. He experienced all the events that I had to memorize in 5th grade history: World War II, space travel, the Civil Rights Movement, the invention of the Pop-Tart, major world events. And his life was also marked by these Chronos moments: degrees and moves and churches planted. Preachers like Papa have to be particularly Chronos-minded sometimes. Sunday is always coming, and Chronos keeps us in a forced march. Kairos time has a different character. It is holy time. It is time set apart. Kairos is sometimes referred to as thin space, those sacred moments where time seems to pause so you can experience a little bit of eternity now. Writer Mark Buchanan describes it like this: Kairos time is an opportunity, a gift, a season, time pregnant with purpose. Here you ask not, what time is it, but what is this time for? Kairos time, he writes, is time spent toward eternity. Time spent toward eternity. Kairos moments don't have to be serious or somber or even all that thought-provoking all the time. What makes Kairos Kairos is that it points us towards something more. The clocks in my grandparents' house, they technically kept Chronos time, but to me they always chimed in Kairos. Because they weren't really there to tell time. Not really. They were there to tell stories. The story about their trip to the Black Forest, the story about when they went to Vienna, the story about a relative who gave them this clock, the missionary friend who gave them that one, stories about travel and family and sacred moments along the way. And when we went to visit my whole life, the clocks were just containers surrounding us as we wrote more of our own stories. The Kairos moments when Papa would take me to explore his workshop in the old San Pedro house. His giggles when we watched the Oscar Wilde play that he was certain had been written for him. The importance of being earnest. The way he trash-talked Grandma when they played Rummikub, because let's not pretend he wasn't just as competitive as she was. There were the Kairos moments when he would get a little twinkle in his eye, and you would know that he was up to no good. Of course, Papa was a proper man of the clock, but he was also a man of deep mischief. And when I was little, he'd get this little twinkle in his eye, and I knew that we were about to surprise attack Grandma. He loved to surprise attack Grandma with us kids. When I got older and I moved away and I came home to visit, the Kairos moments changed a bit. They would show up in shared devotions and prayer times around the couch in the mornings, the slow walks and meandering conversations around the neighborhood, the buttered toast he would weave around Grandma in the kitchen to make, Papa might not have spent a lot of time in the kitchen. He wasn't allowed there, but the toast that he made was actually Michelin starred. So much of Papa's life was marked by ministry demands, and when you read his autobiography, it seems at first like it's a long list of events and accomplishments. But in between all of those, he also wove in some kairos. The time they learned the hard way about Southern cooking on one of their evangelistic tours, he wrote, "We learned that everything that looks like syrup is not syrup. Sometimes it's grease gravy. The recipe for grease gravy is to take some grease, add some more grease, and then if you don't have enough grease, find some more grease. To this must be added a little water to keep it from sticking to your tonsils on the way down." Needless to say, I stopped asking folks to pass the syrup. Or how about the time he stayed with a preacher who was not reading the room? He wrote, "Each day at mealtime, after a good hot meal had been placed on the table, Mr. Preacher would suggest that we all kneel by our chairs for prayer. As the meal grew lukewarm, then cold, then colder as we prayed for missionaries, leaders, all the members of my family by name, I must admit I spent most of my time praying for patience. Now, mind you, I believe in prayer for the missionaries and all the rest, but I prefer to practice it away from the dinner table." Or how about the time they were traveling in the South on a hot summer day? "More bugs came to church that night than people. I was singing a duet with my wife and a bug flew right in my open mouth. It takes a lot of grace to gulp, spit out a bug, and keep on singing. I didn't know for sure if I was fighting bugs or the devil." None of those stories got written in his obituary, but they are part of it all the same. Chronos moments are important to mark in anyone's story, but it's the kairos moments that give that story a soul. When I was a little girl and Papa was still working in part-time ministry, he would take me to church services with him sometimes. And I remember being fascinated, not by what was being spoken from the pulpit, because who wants to listen to a preacher anyway, but by what was happening behind the scenes. My husband, who knows I'm a preacher, just laughed at that. I was fascinated by what was happening behind the scenes. In the moments of spontaneous prayer for his parishioners before the service, and the casual conversations with people whose lives he knew so well. In the moments he'd get to be Papa instead of pastor for a second and introduce his flock to his granddaughter. There are lots of reasons that I became a pastor myself, but I think those kairos moments with my Papa behind the scenes of church set some of that in motion. I think Papa had always hoped that someone in the family would take after him in ministry, and lots of family members have in different ways. I'm not sure any of us anticipated, including me, that I would end up as the preacher. When Papa retired from the ministry, he asked me if I wanted any of his books from his pastoring days, and boy did I ever. I remember Papa laughing at my book selections as we packaged them up to mail to where I was pastoring in Massachusetts, and he said, "Why, I think you're becoming a Pentecostal." I did not become a Pentecostal, but you would not know it by my pastor study in the church.